in addition to doing what the Treasury does, which is collect taxes from people and then make sure that those taxes are well spent, we also have a stewardship role. Thankfully, we can play in this beautiful country, that we can look 40 years ahead, and under the law of the land we have to, called the Public Finance Act 1989, where without any interference from politicians, we need to hold the mirror on the country by consulting with communities and saying what are the big issues emerging in New Zealand and what are the implications of those and what do we need to do about those. And one of these emerging issues is poverty. It is a social disease. It is getting worse, and it's a matter of getting in front of it before it consumes us. And the point of public policy in that very context is to help people live the kinds of lives they have reason to value. And poverty, in this broadest sense, is a condition which excludes people from participating in society so that they are unable to live the kinds of lives they have reason to value. We, as public policy advisors to the government, do not have the right to tell people how to live their lives, and we don't. What we say is recognizing that people want to live their lives in all their various ways and respecting that, what can public policy do towards achieving that? And the way we frame is to say that we want to create the opportunities and capabilities for people to live the lives they have reason to value. So the kinds of things the young people told you a few minutes ago are all about opportunities and capabilities, about education, health, community, and so on, is all about giving them the ingredients with which they can cook whatever they want to eat. What you like eating is none of my business. The business of public policy is to make sure you have access to those ingredients so that you can cook whatever meal you want to cook. Although it's none of our business to tell you how to live, when we do research around the world, we find that the kinds of things people care about are pretty common. And I give a list. If you cannot read it, I'll just give you a flavor of it. Not surprisingly, people care about their material well-being, their income and their jobs and so on. But they also care about housing. They care about their health status. They care about their education and skills. They want to have a balance in their life, so they do work, but they spend time with their loved ones. They care about the environmental quality. They don't just want to be super wealthy and come out of their palaces and smell stink or inhale pollution. They want to live in a clean environment. And they care about their social connections and their networks and their friends and families. So those are common across humanity, whichever culture you look at and so on, so they are common. So that gives us a basis to work for when we say we want to give people the opportunities and capabilities to live the kinds of lives they have reason to value. We are saying these are the main ingredients we should make sure that they have access to. So we define poverty in the context of saying if people do not have access to these things and therefore they cannot participate, they are poor. It's not about income poverty only, it's about the poverty that excludes you through whatever means from participating and being a productive member of society. And when you define it that way, we find through our analysis that depending how nitty-gritty you get, 10 to 15% of people in New Zealand are broadly poor in that broader sense. There's a lot of debate on whether it's getting better or worse. Nobody is saying it's getting better, but there's a lot of debate on what's getting worse. Frankly speaking, I don't care. The reality is there is poverty, and we need to get in front of it. Otherwise, whether you like it or not, it will get worse, because one of the most defining books I've read when I came to New Zealand in 1978, written by Professor John Gould, argued that in good things and bad, New Zealand follows the world, with a 20-year lag, and unless we get in front of this, we will do whatever is happening around the world. And so we cannot afford that, and as one of the young people said, that's unacceptable, it's embarrassing. So what we do is to talk about an investment approach. There are two things we need to do. One, we need to make sure that we look after the poor of today. And secondly, we need to invest to make sure that the young people do not get poor. So there are two things in this pyramid. At the bottom it says, whatever you do, you need to base it on the culture and values of the country and society we live in. You cannot import ideas from outside and say this is cut and paste. We can learn from other people, but we cannot just cut and paste. The culture and history of this place defines how we are going to address these issues. You have to make sure that everyone has access to basic income, health, housing, and so on. And then comes the investment approach, which says, what do we need to do to prevent the younger people, the new people of tomorrow, to actually from falling into it? And we think of it in those terms. We say we're endowed with some capital stocks. It's not only physical and financial capital, but it's also human capital, our health and our education. It's about our natural capital and our environment. It's our social capital, our networks, our culture. And what public policy needs to do is to make sure that we build on that capital stock in a way that's sustainable across generations, so future people are looked after, that we live in cohesion in an increasingly diverse society, and everything we do is sustainable. One example of what I'm going on about is in the context of social investment. Although we are no good at solving the community's problems, because the communities, as again the young people said, need to identify and find solutions to those problems, all we can do is to support them. What we can do is to identify the problems ahead and try to prevent them. So one of the things we are doing in the broader investment area is what we refer to as social investment. Now we have the data that indicates that if a child has about 4 or 5 symptoms, then they will be in trouble in one way or another within the next 10 to 15 years. So we can identify those indicators. Typically, single family situations where the mom or dad has been unemployed for a long time, they have health or drug issues and so on, and they various other symptoms you can talk about. We can identify the children who are in that category. We actually know who they are. And what social investment is all about is then, having identified those children, working with them and their families, what can we do with them and for them in order to prevent them from falling into the kind of trouble they would unless we help them. And that's what we mean by social investment approach. The challenge we face is the current public sector is not very well fit to operate in terms of addressing and solving those problems. Because our public sector, education, health, treasury and all that, were created as silos 170 years ago to solve their own problems, education, health, and so on. What we need is those agencies to work together towards solving the individual's problems, and I increasingly believe, and so does the Treasury, that this will be resolved at the community level. In other words, the communities will identify their problems, they will find solutions to their own problems, and what we could do is to then test whether those so-called solutions are working, see whether we can share them across society so we can learn from each other, and then invest in them. To give you one example from Canterbury, where I was involved indirectly, the Canterbury Youth Development Program, working in their own communities, had identified 24 children and their families and started working with them. They invested their own money, up to $3 million, in working with their families. We went and actually faced with those people who were doing it, and they started changing the lives of those people. They don't need the help of bureaucrats in Wellington to tell them how to fix it. They had already integrated those services, social services, mental health, police, education and all that. What they were looking at is the central government to come in as a assistant and supporter to work with them and give them some further funding so they can extend that from 24 children to 64 children, not 6,000, 64, because they had identified them. So that's what the investment approach is all about. And the reason we're in these communities is to encourage people to get involved, to come up with their ideas, and then, as Wendy said, we will get the mayors to go to the ministers, said, although there are all kinds of issues here, here are 3 or 4 of them that we can zoom in on and try to solve. We have some ideas, we need your support. In the meantime, what we can also do is to create databases where all the community ideas can be shared across the country, can be tested by the people in Wellington to see if they work or not, and then if they do, we actually invest in them through funding and resources, and that's what the investment approach is all about. So to close, there are 2 prongs to this thing. One is to address current poverty, and 2, to invest to make sure that poverty doesn't grow. And that's what the focus of the investment approach is all about. Thank you for allowing us to be part of the conversation. Thank you.